Hello, BookTube, and welcome back to Shorty September, a BookTube event spotlighting shorter works, books that are fewer than 200 pages, fewer than 100 pages, maybe even fewer than 50 pages, as long as it's a book. You pull those things off your shelves in order to give them a little love. Instead of constantly muddling around in the 250 to 280 pages that most books are, or attempting the gigantic books, much bigger, more ambitious things. I love the variety of Shorty September, and I've been trying to do a Shorty September video for you every day, just to put possibly new things in front of you, and to do so with a lot less guilt than I usually feel. Usually, when I'm bombarding you with recommendations of books, I am bombarding you with recommendations of 300, 400, 500, 600 page books, and a lot of you have lives. You have classes to go to, or jobs, or loved ones, or workout routines, or all sorts of other things, other hobbies that you do. So those recommendations pile up. Whereas a short recommendation that I unconditionally commend to you, you can go and do right away. Now, that won't necessarily be true with today's book, not in its form. You could probably find an ebook of it. What we're looking at today is The Courtier's Library by John Donne. A tiny little thing here that is a book in a slipcase, and that is going to cause some of you who know me in person to wince. But no, I did not destroy the book. I have a terrible record with books in slipcases. I tend to destroy them. But this is a trifle that John Donne wrote. He never published. He did talk about it. He wrote about it for decades. He alluded to it, that he was compiling this little ditty, this little satirical exercise. But it didn't see the light of day until after he was dead, when his son, John Donne the Younger, there had been, by this point, a few editions of his poetry, and they'd done well. And then, as now, one of the ways that you would sell an edition of John Donne's poetry would be to advertise that there was something new in this collection. So that if you have the previous collection, well, the 1650 collection has something you haven't seen before. And John Donne the Younger brought forward a few of those things. And one of those little things that he brought forward is this book, was the contents of this book, which is that right there, this lovely Nonesuch Press printing here on this thick, creamy paper. This is the Catalogus Librorum Alicorum. In other words, a catalog of rare books not for sale. By John Donne, edited by Evelyn Mary Simpson. And this includes a translation of the Courtier's Library of rare books done by Simpson's husband. And the annotations are all by her, and the introduction is by her, and that's great because she was great. It is a sign of the I hesitate to use the word patriarchy because it has been so poisoned by the kind of people I detest. But nevertheless, we get a bunch of Shakespeare biographies every year, or every other year, or every 5 years. We get a bunch of Hemingway biographies every 5 years. And the ground is almost completely untilled. The field is almost completely wide open for serious, engaging, popular press, general audience books about any of the great intellectual women of letters in the last 200 years. Most of the great women writers in the last 200 years. It's just, to the best of my knowledge, there has never been a biography of Evelyn Mary Simpson. And there should be. Because she led an incredibly remarkable life. And it shows even in her letters, let alone in her own books. But her books, her autobiography, she was a scholar. She was the foremost John Donne scholar of her day, and was the driving force behind a massive amount of Donne scholarship in her life. This was a trivial exercise for her, coming out with this little book that came out in 1930 and contains some original translations that had never been done between 1650 and 1930. As she points out in her brief introduction, I could have stood the introduction to be as long as this book. But as she points out, most Donne scholars and translators ignored the Courtier's Library because it seemed like such a trifle, and also because it was introduced to the world by John Donne Jr., who was not very trustworthy. So people wondered, well, what about the provenance of this thing? We don't want to put this in a new edition of Donne's work if it's not really by him. But as Simpson points out in her introduction here, Donne was mentioning this. He mentions it in a few letters, over decades. So he certainly did write it. It certainly is his, and you can tell that anyway when you go through it. And it will take you precisely 10 minutes to go through it. This edition has the Latin, and then the Latin is followed by the English, and then that is followed pricelessly by just a rundown of all the people who are in this book. Because in this book, John Donne lists a whole bunch of fake books. He gives their title and their subtitle so you know what they're about. A whole bunch of fake books by real people. And the juxtaposition of the real people and the subject of the book is supposed to be the motor of the satire. Which is, you imagine doing something like that today. So what would you imagine if you made a list of imaginary books and one of them was A Hymn of Praise to the Sober Life by Rudy Giuliani. Something like that is what I mean. You can easily see that happening, and or The Joys of Prolific Publication by Donna Tartt. There would be a satirical sting in each of those entries, and that is true in this book. That's what this is. There's precious little other than that. So the whole thing, the introduction, the Latin text, the English translation, and then that rundown of all the people who've done names, all of that takes place in this book, which has, barely 50 pages? What is the total here? Well, okay, this little book it goes up to 91 pages. But it's the size of a playing card, so it's 50 pages, maybe even less than that. And it's wonderful. It's really enjoyable to go through. It's a trifle, but it was made into a book, so it does count. I should also point out, I wish that this were Simpson's biography. I wish there were a biography of her that I could recommend to you. A scholar respected by everyone, but restricted by the stupid rules of the schools of her day, who gave up scholarship in order to go and tend to the wounded during war. Then went back to scholarship and earned a degree, earned the first woman who earned her degree in the history of Oxford. But because of the stupid, antiquated rules of Oxford, she was doing just fine, earning accolades as a scholar, specifically a Donne scholar, although she's also really good on Ben Jonson. When she fell in love and married, and according to the laws of the school, she couldn't be a tutor anymore if she was married. Just all the stuff that seems so antiquarian now. That she was wise and smart and wonderful. That comes through like crazy in her letters, which I don't think have ever been collected and annotated. I don't think there's ever been a volume like that. Her work, I don't think, has ever been collected. She wrote a whole lot of occasional pieces that I doubt are collected anywhere. But in her introduction, she gets in a few lines about Donne that I wanted to mention to you because they are so good. There's one, just basically a 2-sentence thing that just perfectly captures Donne, especially the parts of him that confuse new readers. Let's see here. She says, if the mystics and occultists are satirized in the catalogue and studied with fervent attention in the essays, we have but one more proof of that curious duality in Donne's nature, which meets us in all his work. Donne the cynic and Donne the mystic were not confined to different epochs of his life. They existed side by side, and in this middle period, the pull of both was strong, so that it was still uncertain which would prevail. That's marvelous. That is just marvelous. And at the end of her little introduction here, she says, although the catalogue is in prose and in an alien tongue, it has qualities which have made the satires famous. Here is the authentic Donne, enigmatic, exasperating, intensely alive. That's marvelous. That's just marvelous. And it's a little thing. Shorty September is not for gigantic masterpieces, and this might be hard for you to find, this particular Nonsuch Press edition. Virginia Woolf actually reviewed her war memoir in the TLS and praised it. and everyone else praised it too. I wish I could find a copy of that book, but and oh my God, I have no idea whether or not her multi-volume edition of Done is a collector's item. It might be. I certainly have never seen even one volume or even a hint of it in the wild. I would love to have her edition of Done, but she's amazing, and she makes an amazing little trifle here. She and her husband make an amazing little trifle here, and it's not a question of bootstrapping or primacy either. All of her friends, and I believe all of her children, all of her colleagues, everyone, and especially her husband, all readily admitted that between the two of them, she was by far the better scholar, by far the deeper thinker, by far the better writer. So when I say her and her husband, I'm very much intentionally giving him the ancillary role. But there is your Shorty September for today, the Courtier's library of books that don't exist. That it was a joy to read. So I will wrap this up, and we will see what we encounter tomorrow. Thank you.